I initially thought about doing a short over this book, but I quickly realized, no, I need the extra time so that we can actually have a nuanced conversation about this. I also just want to make it clear that while I am a part of the greater alphabet soup of queer lifestyles, I am a cisgendered woman, so that is the experience that I will be coming to this discussion with. And also my cat is on the desk right now. He is like right next to the microphone. You might be able to hear him purring a little bit. And he's honestly being so cute and sweet that I don't have the heart in me to tell him to get off the desk. So we're just going to see how long this lasts. Okay, roll title. Hello everyone, I hope you're having a good day so far. My name is Emily and welcome to another episode of If the Slipper Fits. If you're new here, this is my series where I discuss just about any version of the Cinderella fairy tale that I can get my hands on. So once again, I was traipsing around my local library, happening to find myself in the folklore section. It was a day ending in Y, when I came across a title of... The cat is gone, okay. When I came across a title I immediately knew required further investigation: Gender-Swapped Fairy Tales. This is a collection published in 2020 with illustrations by Carrie Fransman and text courtesy of her husband, Jonathan Plackett. The author's note is long, and I'm not going to dissect every word of it on camera, but it really helps to read if you pick this book up for yourself. I know I've said before that whatever a reader takes away from a book is valid and authorial intent shouldn't mean much in the long run, and I do still stand by that. But in this instance, I think reading the author's note answers some important questions and gives you a better understanding of what Fransman and Plackett are trying to do, and also what they're not trying to do. Let me actually explain. So Plackett works as a creative technologist, which, full disclosure, I had to look up what the heck that meant because it sounded like somebody just slapped a few root words together, and apparently I wasn't alone. And he created an algorithm that would change the gendered language of whatever text you threw at it, so pronouns, forms of address, etc. And side note, I know the bar is in the underworld right now, but after being accosted day in and day out by both individuals and corporations trying to tell me that AI should be a normalized part of the creative process, it's so refreshing to read that Plackett made this algorithm himself and didn't just ask ChatGPT to change the text or something. Just had to say that. He and Fransman then decided to use the algorithm with fairy tales, but only changing the gendered language and leaving the rest of the text as originally presented. They actually used the Andrew Lang fairy books as their source texts, specifically the blue, red, and yellow editions. And this collection they put together features tales from the Brothers Grimm, Hans Christian Andersen, Gabrielle Suzanne de Villeneuve's version of Beauty and the Beast, and of course, all of the greatest hits from Charles Perrault, including Cinderella. Sleeping Beauty is also in here, but if there's a little panic alarm going off in the back of your brain like it did mine, worry not. The version of Sleeping Beauty that is in the Blue Fairy book does not contain the lack of consent that some other versions do, so we do not need to answer that particular question today. Thank the Lord. And yes, as you may have seen before, I do own a copy of the Blue Fairy book, so I can confirm that this is the same base text. There are a couple of slightly different individual words here and there, so it's possible they might have pulled from a different printing, I don't know. But for all intents and purposes, this is the same. It's simply that the stepsisters are now stepbrothers, the prince is now a princess, and of course Cinderella is now portrayed as a man named Cinder. And because this is at its core the exact same story, I'm not going to recap it again, but if you need a synopsis, you can go watch my Charles Perrault video. Now, did both the title and the basic concept of Plackett's algorithm make me squirm a little bit at first? Yes. Because gender is not an either-or situation. It is a spectrum, and people can experience it and express it in all kinds of different ways and at all kinds of levels. And my worry was that the creators were going to be complacent to that there are only two genders ideology. But I will let Franzman's own words speak to that. It's important here to stop and talk about the word gender and what we are swapping. We should state that we are not suggesting that there are only two genders to swap. For the purposes of this discussion, we view the term sex as focusing on the body and gender as socially constructed. Most cultures divide gender into feminine and masculine and all the social roles, norms, and behaviors that separate them. However, these days, people are increasingly becoming comfortable inhabiting the space in between these dichotomized ideas of femininity and masculinity. We have people who identify as gender non-binary, queer, transgender, gender fluid, agender or other gender, and more. But the division of feminine and masculine is still prominent in most people's minds and also in language. By swapping these two dominant gender constructs, we want to disrupt this binary and ask people to question what assumptions we make about gender in society. So that was, just really reassuring to read. But yeah, we do live in a society where a lot of things are needlessly gendered or otherwise associated with the masculine or the feminine. Just take a glance down the razor aisle at the grocery store if you don't believe me. And Plackett and Franzman are basically using this opportunity to question why certain roles in these stories have been so fiercely labeled as either feminine or masculine, which is a type of exercise I always welcome. And it's not an unheard of thing to do when it comes to adapting fairy tales either. Although this is the first time I've seen it done to quite this scale. Immediately, my mind goes back to the Rudolf Nureyev Cinderella ballet that I previously covered, where the fairy godmother role was changed to be a male character, and the stepmother role was performed by a man in drag. Now, when it comes to the very limited alteration of the text, I'm a little... Well, let me just explain. I'm not afraid to say that I was initially a bit hesitant when I read that it was just the same text put through an algorithm. For lack of a better word, it sounded a bit lazy at first blush. I also felt disappointed that the text wouldn't intentionally interact more with the gender changes, or at least acknowledge them in a more significant way. And I do think there is a space where that kind of adaptation is not only welcomed, but needed. But Franzman and Plackett also explain that they left the text this way specifically to challenge the traditional masculine and feminine stereotypes present in the original texts. Which, as a general rule, I knew existed. But as I was actually reading through, I found myself being surprised by the changes. Not the big ones like the protagonists and such, I knew those were coming. But weirdly enough, it's the smaller changes that really threw me for a loop. Like when Cinder is getting his carriage and entourage and everything, my brain did stutter a little, reading the words coach woman and foot women rather than coachman and footman. Now, in my heart, I know that women can have any job that men can have. I've known this for a significant portion of my life. I played with Barbie dolls, okay? But I don't think until that very moment that I had actually considered the idea of a woman driving a coach as an occupation and not just because she happens to own it. And I immediately realized, oh, that's why they did it this way. For the younger audience who might still be learning these stories or even exposed to one for the very first time, the gimmick commits to the bit so hard that it kind of stops becoming a gimmick and the reader is able to absorb it as straightforward as possible. Meanwhile, for those of us who have already been exposed to these stories countless times, it's to help us unlearn those neural pathways that the older versions have dug into our brains. And it just gave me the uncomfortable but necessary reminder that yeah, we do live in a patriarchy and I'm a little bit brainwashed. Which, is always fun to think about on a Tuesday evening. Changing the genders of the main characters is one thing, but changing the genders of literally everyone in the story's universe is a whole different impact. And my gut tells me that a writer trying to do a more intentional adaptation relating to gender, despite their best intentions, might not put as much weight into those smaller changes, and would ultimately still set it in a world closer to our own, where men always come before women in order of operations. And for any fellow writers out there, yeah, that is a challenge, prove me wrong. And there's one more thing in the author's note I just have to mention. They do make a comment about how this formula didn't really give them the chance to challenge the heteronormativity present in the original tales, and that they would need to create a different algorithm to do that. And to that I say, yes! Wake me up when that book is done. I will be at Barnes & Noble with bells on. A part of me wishes I had more to say about how this experiment specifically affects the Cinderella story, but it's what you'd expect in more ways than one. Once again, I've been over the main text before. I don't need to get in the weeds on that. But yeah, it is weirdly refreshing to read about masculine presenting characters being so concerned with getting married and with their appearance, and also being so transparent with their feelings and not being afraid to cry in front of others. And what's especially refreshing is when you get to the end and Cinder forgives his stepbrothers, doesn't hold a single grudge in his body, even though he is completely justified to do so, and asks that they all move forward with love. Yes, it's basic, but my God, is it necessary? And this book has shown me that sometimes you do need a really pretty package to understand the importance of a basic message. And this book is really pretty. Just look at some of these illustrations. There's so many interesting shapes and there's so much movement. It's kind of like a fanciful and more elegant version of that flat cartoonized romance book style that's really popular right now. I don't know if I should say that, but I'm not going to apologize either. And the character designs range from traditionally pretty to actually a little disturbing to look at straight on, which of course is the appropriate range for fairy tales. So ultimately, does Cinderella work with its genders changed? Yeah. Obviously, yeah. At face value, nothing about the story has to do with the fact that she's a woman. And Cinderella can serve as a role model for basically anybody, regardless of gender or orientation or general self-expression or whatever else. I do think in the historical context, hard quotes, her lack of power in her situation is at least partly due to her being a woman. See, once again, patriarchy, but that's not to say that men are inherently excluded from also being in a situation where they lack power. Men can be victims just like women can, and I think that's something we don't talk about nearly enough. And as Franzman explains, these are worlds where dragons and fairies and magical beings exist, and no one bats an eye. Why should our suspension of disbelief break at what characters present as what gender? It shouldn't. And at the end of the day, in the most loving way possible, it doesn't even matter. And with that, thank you so much for joining me today. Like I said, this was originally going to be a short, and then I needed some more room with it, so it might be a little wonky runtime-wise, but I still hope you enjoyed it. And if you didn't know, yes, I also do shorts episodes of this series, and you can find those in the playlist on the end screen and in the description. You can show your support for this video by giving it a like, and if you'd like to see new episodes when they come out, then consider subscribing. The next episode's gonna be for the theater kids, and that's all I'll say right now. But for now, I think I'm about to turn into a pumpkin, so I will see you next time. Bye! Fitz, darling, you have to go. Fitz, buddy, I don't want to be mean. Come on. All the way. Come on. Fitz. Yes, I know you want love. I know you want love, but I have to film right now. I love you. You have to go now. No, you can't. You're gonna knock something off with your tail. Fitz, you can't just sit here the whole time. Do you want to try to do this? We will see how long this lasts.